Hi, everyone. Happy New Year to you. My name is Chris Griggs, and I, along with Professor John Andrews, would like to welcome you to the Managing Intelligence Analysis Functions course at Florida State University. Wanted to let you know that this course might be organized a little differently than maybe some courses you've taken in the past, and that's because Professor Andrews and I have decided to split this course up into basically two big parts. The first part will comprise the first 6 weeks, and during those 6 weeks, I will be your primary instructor. Week 7 and beyond will be Professor Andrews, and he'll be working with you on that part. The first 6 weeks, we are going to be focusing on the genesis and evolution of law enforcement intelligence and data driven decision methodologies. And then towards the end of the 6 weeks, you'll get some exposure to basic geospatial intelligence and mapping concepts. And then that will lead into Professor Andrews' portion where you're going to be talking about structured analytic techniques and other methodologies, analytic methodologies supporting law enforcement operations and investigations. The reason we decided to start off with a discussion on the evolution of law enforcement intelligence from the beginning is because I think it is very important for everyone to have a very solid grasp of the fundamentals of what intelligence actually is. That's because if you're actually managing, the title of the course is Managing Intelligence Analysis Functions. If you actually find yourself in a position where you are going to be leading an intelligence unit, or maybe you're a supervisor in an intelligence unit, then you are going to be largely responsible for the strategic direction of that unit. That's a big deal because in my experience, and I've been in the intelligence community for about 20 years, most of that was on the defense intelligence side. But then towards the latter part of my career, I've moved over into the law enforcement intelligence sector. And no matter which side you go to, I see the same thing on all sides, which is that there is a big degree of misunderstanding about what intelligence is and what it is supposed to do. And as a result of that, intelligence programs generally are not always well integrated into the daily operations of a law enforcement organization. So I think us having this discussion about the fundamentals is going to be very important. The text for this course for the first 6 weeks is going to be Law Enforcement Intelligence by Dr. David Carter. Dr. Carter is the chair of law enforcement intelligence studies at Michigan State University. And his book was actually funded by the Department of Justice, and as a result of that, the book is now free for public use. So it's not a textbook you'll have to pay for. I have gone ahead and attached the book to the Canvas site. You can also find it online from a lot of different sources. If you do that, just be mindful, please, that it is the second edition of the book. I would recommend that you go ahead and get started on your reading. Week 1 is fairly light. We don't have any assignments this week other than your discussion board posting introducing yourself. So what I would suggest is go ahead and get started this week on your reading. I mentioned that also because the way we've organized the course, since I'm taking the first 6 weeks and John Andrews is taking week 7 and beyond, is we run the course a little differently. For me, your due dates for all assignments are going to be Sunday by midnight. For Professor Andrews, your assignments are going to be due on, I believe he has them due on Tuesday mornings. So when we do get to week 6, you're going to have a short week where your assignment is going to be due. I'm going to have to move the assignment date up to a Thursday, and then your assignments for the following week are going to be on that following Tuesday. So you'll have a very short week there. So as much as you're able, I would suggest trying to get a little bit ahead, at least in the readings. I think it's going to be very important for you. So with that, let's talk just a little bit about intelligence. I saw that many of you have already begun posting in the discussion board this week, introducing yourselves. It looks like we have some folks with some really good experience, and that was encouraging to see. I think folks who have worked in the intelligence field or the crime analysis field have a lot to bring to the discussions, a lot of rich experiences and stories they can share, and I think that's great. So for those of you that have a lot of experience, some of this might be more basic for you. It might be some information that you've seen before, but again, it's information that I think is fundamental and critical. So it never hurts to have a review in those cases. So let's talk just a moment about intelligence, particularly for those of you that are new to the field, that have never worked in intelligence before. Maybe this is your first class dealing with the intelligence tradecraft. think about what conceptions you had of intelligence. When you hear the word intelligence, what does it bring to mind for you? For those that have been in the field a while, try to think back to before you were in the field, and what you thought about intelligence and what it meant to you. I think for most people, when they hear intelligence, for those that are outside the intelligence field, they tend to their impression of intelligence tends to be shaped by movies or television or books they've read, and generally people tend to immediately think of spying when they think of intelligence, which is not wrong. Spying is one aspect of intelligence, but it's far from the only part. Intelligence is a much larger enterprise than simply just spying. That's only one very, very small part. Then, if you go and you try to look at definitions of intelligence that various agencies have put forward, a lot of times you'll look and they'll say that intelligence is the end product of an analytic process. So intelligence then becomes that paper or report that you're reading that has been created by analysts, and that's what they call intelligence. But I would argue that that's also a very limited description of what intelligence actually is. And so I have a definition that I would like to put forward just from my own experience. And I think this lines up with some other agencies' definitions as well. But for those of you that are in the community now, I would be interested in your thoughts on this definition as well. In my mind, intelligence is a coordinated group of activities focused on achieving information advantage over an adversary in pursuit of a goal. So I'll read it again. Intelligence is a coordinated group of activities focused on achieving information advantage over an adversary in pursuit of a goal. So that's kind of my working definition for intelligence right up front. I like that definition because in my mind, it's all encompassing. So it accounts for people's for spying, for the end product of an analytic process. It accounts for different disciplines of intelligence. So that definition that I just provided can apply to national security intelligence. It can apply to law enforcement. It can apply to Homeland Security, and can even apply to private sector or what we call competitive intelligence functions. They are all about trying to target information specifically to gain a competitive advantage for some reason. It's the reason is what differs. In the case of a private sector, you're looking to beat a competitor to market maybe with a new product. And in the law enforcement community, we are trying to combat crime and criminals. So we're trying to achieve information advantage over criminals. So in a nutshell, up front, that's what intelligence is. A way that I can maybe explain it to someone to understand sort of the big picture of intelligence, if you don't know what intelligence is or you have no prior exposure to intelligence, is I'll provide an analogy. Let's think in terms of a job interview. Let's say that you have been contacted about a job interview and you're going to go in an interview. Now, you have other people, your competitors, that have been invited in for an interview as well, but you don't know who they are, you don't know what they know, and you don't know how qualified they are for the position. So you have some decisions to make about what you can do to prepare for your interview. Let's say your interview is going to be in a couple of weeks. Are you going to do anything to prepare, or are you just going to go in and wing it? I would argue that any efforts you can make to try to prepare yourself is going to be helpful, more helpful than doing nothing at all. But using that intelligence definition again about achieving information advantage. What are some things you can do to be more informed as an applicant to this vacant position? A lot of people will go out on the web and they will do some open source searches about the company. They'll learn about the company and what the company's mission is to help inform them and help them think from the hiring manager's perspective about what the company is looking for, what skill sets the company's looking for, or what type of attitude the company's looking for. That could be helpful. If you want to drill down a little deeper than that, maybe you go onto LinkedIn or another job networking site and you actually look for some of the employees of the company currently. That's another way. Look at the people who are working there now. See if you know anyone. See if anyone is connected to your network. Now, if the stakes were very high, let's say this is a really high-paying job and the stakes are high and you have a long time to prepare for this job interview, is there other things you could do? Is there other ways you could achieve information advantage? Well, if you were really sly, now that you've been in an intelligence functions course at Florida State University and you know all of this, well, maybe now something you could do is learn who works at the company, maybe arrange a way to run into them or meet them, make personal connections with the folks who work in the company, make friends in the company, find ways to get introduced to them so that you know some folks in the company that can help give you some inside information or some tips about how to make yourself more competitive. Find out what the hot issues are that the company's dealing with. Maybe find out who the actual person is that's interviewing so that you can look them up. Maybe they have some hobbies that you might have in common. So these are all things. These are all ways that you can achieve information advantage over your competitors so that when you walk into the interview, you're prepared. And that is a good analogy, I think, for the intelligence system, for any intelligence system really, is it is a systematic way to collect information to give yourself a competitive edge over someone in pursuit of a goal. So hopefully, as a result of doing that, then you would be the one to get the job and not someone else who didn't go to the same lengths that you did. So another thing that I've seen in my experience is, especially in the law enforcement side of intelligence, is that many law enforcement agencies, especially at the local level, will have an analyst unit. They'll bring on, they'll have a chief or a sheriff who comes in, and then they will bring in an analyst unit and say, all right, we have established an intelligence function at our agency. We now are an intelligence-led policing organization, which we're going to talk about over the next few weeks, what intelligence-led policing actually is. But what I would say is that bringing in an analyst unit does not always necessarily result in intelligence-led policing actually occurring. That's because an intelligence function is much more than just analysts in a law enforcement context. That's one of the things that I think it's hard to get some leaders to understand in law enforcement agencies is just having an analyst unit does not mean you're an intelligence-led organization. Intelligence is a cycle. That's another thing we'll be talking about is the intelligence cycle. And I know that's probably something you've looked at in the other courses in this program, but it won't hurt to do a review in light of a managing an intelligence unit perspective. Intelligence is much more than just the analyst. The intelligence cycle would involve the leaders of the organization who set the intelligence priorities. Hey, what crimes are we actually, what are the priority crimes that we're looking at? Or in my case, I was at the Florida Highway Patrol in the intelligence unit, and the Florida Highway Patrol is interesting because they are not a traditional law enforcement agency. They're not a local agency that's policing crime in the same way. They're primarily a traffic enforcement agency. But what's interesting is the Florida Highway Patrol is on all the major U.S. highways and corridors, so that puts them in a really interesting, advantageous position to be able to interdict inter-county or inter-city crime. And so the leader of an organization like that would recognize the Highway Patrol's distinct role in combating crime and then set the according intelligence priorities. And that would be true of any law enforcement agency, is the leader has to set the priorities. But then just because the leader set the priorities, it doesn't immediately now go to the analysts. Someone has to collect this information. So who are the collectors in a law enforcement context? We know that when we watch movies about the CIA or, international spies or national security intelligence, we have spies, we have case officers that go out and recruit people to get information. That's one avenue to gather information. We call them intelligence collectors. But who are those people? We don't have spies in the law enforcement community as such. So who are the people that collect the information? Well, it's the officers, it's the investigators, it's the folks that are out there in the field making contact with folks and getting exposed to different evidence, different situations. Even in the course of just a routine traffic stop, an officer might see something that's suspicious that might be of interest to an intelligence unit. So once those officers collect the information, they provide it back to then probably an analyst unit who will go through it, ensure that it meets certain standards. They will analyze it and then provide the results back out, probably back out to the officers in the field as well as the leadership, depending on what type of intelligence product it actually is. And then it's on those officers or leaders to then take action and improve what they're doing based on the information that was given to them. And that's the cycle. So you can see why when a leader of a law enforcement agency brings in just an analyst unit and says they're intelligence led, It's not necessarily true. You have to have an intelligence process involves everyone at the agency. It's truly a full agency effort. So um, another area that I think is often overlooked in the intelligence field is what we call counterintelligence. So if intelligence is about gathering information to achieve information advantage, then counterintelligence is the other side of that, which is to deny an adversary information about your own operations that would otherwise provide them a competitive advantage against you. Um, Law enforcement agencies are quick sometimes to hop on social media and talk about operations they're doing, or post pictures of their officers at different ceremonies or events. But when we do that, we always have to balance and think in terms of what information are we putting out there in public that an adversary might be able to use for a competitive advantage or gain against law enforcement. So those are just a few early thoughts for us to get you thinking in terms of intelligence, to get you into the right mindset and kind of frame the discussion that we're going to be having over the next few weeks. I look forward to interacting with all of you in the discussion forum. I'll be reading that and replying frequently. I'm looking forward to it. Again, I'm very approachable and available. If you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to contact me. You should have my email address through the site. My cell phone number is 813-545-3105. And feel free to, I work during the day, but feel free to text me or call and leave a message if I don't answer, and I'll be sure to return your call back as quickly as I can. Again, really looking forward to it. Excited to have you all here. I think it's going to be a great semester. I'm very passionate about the intelligence field. I'm passionate about this class. I'm confident that all of you are going to walk away with something that you're going to remember and use going forward in your careers. So good luck to us all. I look forward to talking to you. Thanks.